Okay. And it's good to see everybody this evening. So my subject is Pesach and Shavuot, which can be, I have to tell you, very intimidating because of any holiday. Probably Shavuot is one that people don't do that much, but we'll see if we get to it. But Passover is one that is probably well known. So I wanted to find a few things that might be a little different that you could add to your both knowledge and your Seder table. And I have a whole slideshow, which we'll share as well later on the website. So I just, okay. The slideshow is up, correct? Yes. I want to thank Isabel, who will probably be editing this video and also helping me create the video. So as always, as you usually do, we're going to start with the study of the prayer for study. So at your own home, if you want to say it yourself, please do. And don't try to look on the, I can't cover it with my hand, but the copy that I got was transliterated. Try not to look at the transliterated part. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. I think I may have even taught this at the very beginning of our sessions for the Bat Mitzvah class. And la'asok means to busy yourself with or to engage, but it really shows that the English and the Hebrew are kind of similar because la'asok almost sounds like to soak in. So our time is to soak in the words of Torah. Okay. So I found many different places for slides. So a great place to start with Passover. I'm not going to get into the esoteric part of how we have to clean our homes and then check to see what the food is. And some people go overboard about all of that. But the essence of the Seder, of course, we use the Haggadah. So this evening, we're going to go through different parts of the Haggadah. And one of the things I wanted to show is that when we read the Haggadah each year, we're actually really studying Mishnah. So what we've been doing in Makom B'Yachad, I know a number of you come on at noon on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, is to study Mishnah, one of our ancient texts. And much of the Haggadah that we have are literally just texts from the Mishnah, with some changes a little bit. So you'll see both how the origin of the Haggadah, the book that we use on the Seder, is from the Mishnah, and also how the development has changed as well, the development of what was originally in the Mishnah and what we have today. I want to tell everyone that I can't see everybody when I'm teaching. So if you have a question, speak up. If I use a word you don't know, I'm going to try not to do that. I try to translate everything I say, but if I happen to slip, interrupt me. It's totally okay. If you have a question, that's good. I have a number of things I do want to get through. So if you have a question, just make sure it's appropriate for the time. So we'll start with, and I know someone's going to say to me, can we make this bigger? I'm not sure if I know how to do that. So I'll read everything. So the symbols of the Seder table, the Seder plate. We start with karpas, which is a symbol of spring. It's a green vegetable, usually parsley, but a lot of people use other things. They might use potatoes, they might use celery. It's the alternative translation is linen. This recalls the tunic that Joseph's brothers dipped into blood to fool their father Jacob. Current connection is the fabricated stories that can make a self-serving truth seem more plausible. So you might think about that in a way, that sometimes we fabricate stories so that things will feel a little better. So a question to ask ourselves: how can we demonstrate both healthy skepticism and respect while challenging stories that seem untrue? So we have a good example of that in this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, which some of you may be studying in preparation for Women's League Shabbat this Shabbat, is Parshat B'Shalach, and we have the story of the splitting of the Red Sea. So some skeptics might say, did the sea really split? How could that possibly have been? Maybe there was some sort of earthquake in the middle, and that's how they walk through. So some people might think that it's skeptical that that could have really happened. Could it have happened? I don't know. But sometimes people become skeptical, and there are a lot of stories in the Torah, like this week's Torah portion, where the sea splits and everyone goes in, and suddenly again it opens up once okay, I wanted to see what the note was, that it was really just, it wasn't a miracle, it was just a natural effect. Could be. Remember, interrupt me if you have any questions. And yes, we're talking about Passover early. Didn't even happen Tu B'Shvat yet. That's Monday. Purim is a while from now because they're 2 Adars. But this was the subject, and it also fits in really well because the Torah portions we've been reading are about Passover. Then we have maror, the symbol of the harshness of slave life. Bitter herbs, usually horseradish, current connection. Sometimes things don't trouble us. Things that don't trouble us are a huge problem for others. So we might be used to things, but it might bother others. What are some things that benefit us, but cause others great pain? Something to think about. The charoset is a symbol of martyr that the slaves used in Egypt, usually a mixture of chopped fruit and nuts. Current connection, martyr is used for building walls that create physical separation. What walls, real or metaphoric, divide us today, and how can we break them down? And that's too real, because if you look in America, if you look in Israel, there are many walls that take place, but hopefully we're breaking them all down. We're going to go to Beitzah, and as I'm reading these, here are some questions I want you to think about. I'm going to stop the slides so we could see each other. One is if anybody has a special charoset recipe they have, or something special at your particular Seder, or a Seder you've been to and something that's special at yours. So I'll read Beitzah, and then as I read this, I'm going to tell you my special thing at our Seder. The symbol of the festival offering, a roasted egg, celebrates spring, renewal, and rejuvenation. So it's really great to be talking about spring when we're cold in the winter right now. Current connection, renewal may also mean a commitment to speaking out about the problems we see around us. So there's a lot going on in the world that we need to speak up about. So how can we renew our voices to advocate for a world that's more just for ourselves and others? Now, hopefully this coming Passover, we can sit at our Seder table with other people. And sometimes what you want to advocate for might not be the same thing as the person across the table from you advocates for, but you also have to realize that hopefully we can have pluralism. So I'll tell you that the special thing at our Seder table, which God willing, if my family gets to Israel for Pesach, we won't be able to do this, but my mother got this from her mother. She has these little porcelain bowls, which I was horrified to ever touch when I was a child, and I still am to this day. And this little porcelain chicken thing that goes above it. And she would put out all the boiled eggs in the Seder, and you'd open it up, and it looks like a chicken, and the chicken hatched, and it had the boiled egg right inside. So there were little ones, and then there was a major one, a big one. So when my cousins came in as a child, they always wanted the eggs right away, but you couldn't eat anything till that was time. And now I think my sister has some, I have some, and we all pray that no one will break them. But it's very cool because you see the egg hatching. So that's one of the special things in our house. The zroa is the symbol of the Pesach offering. The roasted shank bone represents God's outstretched arm that freed us from slavery. So one of the things to think about here is, as we're cleaning for Pesach and Passover, and we're cleaning out our homes, it's not just the literal leaven that we need to take out, the bread, but what is weighing on us? What is enslaving each and every one of us? Everyone has our own slavery that we're going through that we're hoping we have an outstretched arm to help us with as well. So the current connection, there are many people today who are still oppressed and enslaved. How can we more effectively reach out to others? One of the great ways at a Seder table, God willing, during COVID, we could still do this too, is to invite somebody to your Seder, to have someone come into your Seder who might not have anywhere else to go, and to invite them in, and they don't have to be Jewish. It's even nicer to invite somebody who is not of the faith to just bring them in so they can learn a little bit. We'll go to the Chazeret, which is interesting because it's simple. It's not always on every Seder table. Sometimes you need, remember we dip twice. we first dip with the karpas. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then we also dip something into the charoset. So this is the chazeret that people use both to dip and also to make your, so some people might use this for the Hillel sandwich, which we'll get to later. So the romaine lettuce leaf serves as an additional bitter herb. The leaf is visually appealing, but it's bitter at the root. So it reminds me of certain people who might seem okay, but inside there's something bitter about them. And it doesn't have to be bitter as bad, but just something that's eating them up. Current connection, everyone has some darkness within, and a simple smile may hide unhappiness. So in this day and age, because I like to bring it to the present, it might be difficult at times to see that unhappiness nowadays because we're all masked. If you're wearing your mask, you can't really see the true person at times, though you can still see the smile when you lift your eyes under a mask. So how can we remember before we judge people that an impressive exterior can conceal sorrow and pain? So some of the people who might seem the happiest, deep down inside are the saddest. So I just want to go forward with some of these slides, and then I want to ask all of you, what's special about your Seder table? What's some memories that you have? So this is just another depiction of the Seder plate and new traditions. The orange in support of the LGBTQ inclusion. Also, the origin of the Seder table is actually when Susanna Heschel, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's daughter, was teaching. Someone said something about women on the bima, on the stage and on the pulpit at the synagogue is like putting an orange on the Seder table. So nowadays we put the orange on the Seder table, not only to remember that women could be everywhere, especially on the bima, but also LGBTQ inclusion. And olive is in support of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The artichoke in support of interfaith families. Some of these I have to say I've never heard of, but it's kind of cool. A tomato in support of farm workers' rights. So this is a very PC thing. Happen to find it from Whole Foods. Never know where you'll find things. And then I bet that some of our vegetarians here, Julia, do you do this at your house? That instead of the shank bone, people use a roasted beet? And vegans use a flour or a seed to replace the egg. So know that there's always a substitute if you're not going to have eggs on your Seder table because you're a vegan or you're vegetarian. And this is probably a typical Seder plate that people have. Okay, you don't want to hear me all night. What are some memories and special items that you have at your Seder? We'll give ourselves 10 minutes to do this part. Sheila. Just have to unmute yourself.
I started doing this when my first grandchild was born, and we happened to spend that year in Israel. I went to a workshop and we purchased fabric that looks like matzah, and we cut it into 6 by 6, sew it and put stuffing in, and then it becomes an elbow leaner on the table. So I've been doing that since, in fact, the past few years. I've done it as a project at my synagogue. Last year, of course, we had to do it remotely. And I've also had programs on making international charosis. So I have lots of recipes from those programs.
Nice, very nice. And we are going to provide these slides to everybody.
Well, thank you.
So somebody else want to unmute themselves? I can only see a few at a time. Anybody have a favorite charoset recipe? Anne, I see you shaking your head, so share with us.
I have one. It's a Sephardic, and everybody loves it. It's almost like the trail mix, but it's with dates and raisins and nuts. And no, it doesn't have nuts. I don't think. I forget. I have it, and it's delicious, and everybody loves it. And it's I'll send it out. I'll get it. But I make that one, which is Sephardic, and then I also make an Ashkenazic, the one I grew up with, which is just apples, wine, and cinnamon and nuts. So
that's what we do in our house. Dana?
I just wanted to share, excuse me, that we put a Miriam's cup on the table. You didn't mention that, I don't think.
Not yet, but it's
Okay.
later in the presentation.
Oh, okay.
I hope I get to it. I'll make sure I do in that case. I was going to say we could jump ahead to that, but remember, and I'll call on you, Dana. Elisa.
When one of my kids became vegetarian and is now vegan, I had dug out of our basement before we gave it to a younger child, the little Tykes plastic. It looks like a drumstick from the child's barbecue set. And for years, that's what we put on our Seder plate instead of getting a real bone. We used the toy that my kids grew up with, and then we had since given it away. But so ever since then, we'll use something to replace it. But that was really symbolic to them. They loved it.
I like that. Lillian? You figure out it. Okay, good. You're unmuted.
Sorry. One of the things we did to make the grandkids stay awake and be excited, when it came to the Haggadah song, we would divide the room up 3 ways. A third of the room would sing it in English, a third of the room will sing it in Hebrew, and we try to do it together, and a third of the room would do the animal sounds, and we had different for the shochet, you know, and we had all different sounds and everything, and it was like a lot of fun.
I have to say my favorite part of the Seder is the end part, which I honestly don't talk about this evening, which a lot of people cut out, don't do, or they fall asleep during. But those end songs, I have great memories of doing them.
Yeah.
And I love the sound, so that's fun. Corinne.
We have a lot of fun as well, and for the children. The best thing is the frogs. I try and get toy frogs and little plastic ones that jump. And when you do the play, then they sing the song. There were frogs in his bed, and frogs jumped here, and they all sing the song and play with the frogs. And the kids have an absolute ball, and that's really, they love that. And that's something they still remember.
I'll share in that we make my son is the chef. He wanted to make a avocado charoset. Now you might call it guacamole, but truly it was avocado charoset. And then it's good because it also turns brown in the, with the air, so.
My brother modified the Haggadah. He wrote his own with my sister-in-law, and they made it so that everyone would enjoy being there. They ask a lot of poignant questions throughout, and it keeps everyone engaged throughout for the whole Seder. I don't know if you're allowed to do that, but he did. He has all of the traditions there, but he made his own. They made their own booklet with beautiful illustrations, artwork from everywhere. So it really keeps everybody loving to be there. And it passes the evening in a very joyous and pensive and wonderful way.
It's great. And a lot of people do that. I actually collect Haggadot, not fancy ones, though I'd love to. There's one by David Moss, who's an artist in Israel, that hopefully I get to discuss. But every year I try to, not that everyone in my house appreciates it, but I buy 1 or 2 Haggadot each year. So one year I bought a Seinfeld one that goes through what sounds like a Seinfeld episode, but I have serious ones too with some like really intense discussions in it. And if you can make it your own and personalize it, that's what's so great about this holiday. So I think Lori wanted to say something, and then Geraldine and Jill.
I just wanted to also say that he, with the the children, he has pictures of himself with the different looks, and he becomes each of those childs as he grew up. So it's very special.
You all are getting to all of my lesson later on. Exactly. Great. Lori?
Oh, actually, my husband did make a customized Haggadah for us once, and it was really special. We had friends over. It was awesome. No, I just wanted to say the most fun Seder I ever went to. The friends, building on what Corinne said, that some friends had toys for all 10 plagues. They poured them on the table, and they were fun for the adults. I mean, it wasn't just for the kids. We had, but there weren't any children at that Seder, and we had a great time. And anyway, that was all.
It's a holiday for everybody. Geraldine?
Well, good evening, everyone. I went to my first Seder last year. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I was like, sure, I'll go. Okay, and they prepared the Seder plate for me for 2 days. I still have matzah left over from last year. I don't know. They tell me it lasts forever. I don't know. But
it's stale no matter what. So.
Well, it was kind of interesting. You know, it was interesting. So, my sisterhood president wanted me to experience 2 different, Seders. So I went to, and she hooked me up with Jews of color. And so that was pretty interesting because I think, I can't remember her name, but she did her own, help me out, with the book, Haggadah?
Haggadah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was interesting. And that little harsh one, the one that's like the mortar, that bitter thing.
Yeah, the maror, the bitter herb.
Yeah, I hope there's a more interesting process out there than what I had. That was interesting. But I do have to ask one question. What does the frog have to do with the plate?
So it was the second. It's the second of the 10 plagues was frogs.
Okay, so you bring the frogs to the Seder? Is that what you're saying?
Some people, to make it come alive, they have a symbolism of each of the different plagues.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So some people might have a frogs, and there are kits that are made, but if you're more inventive, people make their own.
So I'm looking forward to this year.
Good. And Jill and Karen, and then we're going to go back to my presentation.
Well, I mean, just to go along with you, I like collecting Haggadah also. And there's also a Harry Potter Haggadah, which I have.
I have that one too.
Okay, that's what made me think when you were saying. Now, I guess I'm just thinking, I mean, we haven't done it in several years, but our community our small group in Gainesville, what we would do is, our kids, as they became teenagers in college, I guess, so they're a little bit older, they're actually young adults during the Seder. First of all, lots of times, whoever was a Seder leader would assign like questions to people ahead of time. And we did a lot of discussing and talking, and that's how we started out. I mean, also, everybody used their own Haggadah. We didn't use the same. And I actually used to have 4 and 5 in front of me just because pulling things from different ones. And we did, a lot of in Hebrew, but we also used to tell the story and the major part of the Magid part of it in English. And we'd be reading from all different Haggadot and the different translations and it was just it was always just real interesting and it kept your attention because nothing was ever the same. And I miss that actually. And I don't know when I'll ever have it again, but being in Chicago now, but we'll see.
Good memories, and hopefully it does. Karen?
Hi. Jill said a little bit about what I was going to say. I have had a huge extended family. So for the Seder, there would be between 25 and 30 people. And we had the Maxwell House Haggadah. We had 2 other Haggadah, which I don't remember what they were, but everyone had a different one. And so when we would take turns going around the table, reading, the story, but when you were finished, the next person didn't necessarily know where you were because their Haggadah was different than yours. So it made for a very interesting experience because we all had to talk to each other and say, all right, so where is this in mine? And so I just remember that was so much fun growing up, trying to see where our place was when it was our turn.
Thank you. And someone wrote about the Maxwell Haggadah. I don't think my father ever used another Haggadah. I think maybe his last couple of years when he came to my house and I had young children, he realized that there was no way that my children were going to stay awake through a whole Seder using the regular Maxwell Haggadah, but it was like, you had to use that. And someone wrote that, Alyssa, I think, wrote about the Mrs. Meisel's. I bought that too, and I was a ripoff because all it is that it's the Maxwell Haggadah in pink, which is very nice. It's a new addition to my Seder. And I don't know about any of you, but I was in shock my first couple of times when I went to the stores in Chicago, my first years in the rabbinate. And if you bought a certain amount of food, or even if it was, sometimes it was free, they gave you the Maxwell Haggadah in the supermarket, right? I was shocked. I was like, why are we still using these old ones? But you have the memories of like the stain.
The
on
Mrs. Maisel, you actually had to order the coffee online to get them.
Exactly.
So
my husband could not. He's like, since when do you like coffee? I said, I don't like coffee. I want the Haggadah. So
we just threw away our stack of Maxwell's when we cleaned out everything before we moved, and all the wine and the grape juice stains all over them, and the food. And I mean, you have we had a collection of probably bacterial experiments going on there. So.
Yes. For sure. And then if you don't clean them and you put them away and then you open it again and you have the crumbs in it still. Yeah.
Also, one thing is if you write on the holiday, if you're we sign the Haggadah. So year by year, you can see who was at the Seder and who had that Haggadah. So that's a nice memory too to have.
Great idea. Unfortunately, we never did. Like, I wish that those years when we were using phones, and not even phones, there weren't those type of phones when my family would use the cameras. I wish we had taken pictures. I'll stop this and show it and talk again. After my father passed away 10 years ago, my mother always made the Seders, and she said, it's too hard. I can't do it anymore. I'm taking you all to a hotel. If you want to take us to a hotel on Pesach, Geg is into hate. That was great. But I was a congregational rabbi at the time, so I could never go to the Seders. So she picked a hotel near our house, which happened to be about 20 miles from our old house. And where we live now, it's 8 miles away. So where we live now, I said to her, do I still get to go to the hotel, even though it's 8 miles from my house? She's like, of course you come. So this is the type of place where you could have your own room and your own Seder, or you could
Matzah
be in the
fun
park.
Tours.
Yes, exactly. Matzah
we
fun
were
tours.
We were at Ocean Place. We're probably there together.
Oh my God, probably. That's pretty funny. So, but what's great is that, all these years I was in my own little bubble of my Seder, but now you have a communal place to wash your hands. Well, you used to pre-COVID. So you'd walk out and you'd see everyone else and how they did their Seders. So you had, my niece was in her like frog pajama thing, and somebody else had a whole outfit where he had a suit made of matzah. Some people wear a kittel. If you have a private, which my mother made us have a private room, you have your own waiter who, after all those years, he knew exactly when my mother wanted what. And you could bring your own Seder plate, I think, but we never did because, if you forgot it, that's a bad thing. You have shmura matzah, the round matzah, regular matzah. It was fantastic. And then COVID hit. So we have to learn how to do our own Seder. But the first time I had to do a Seder when I was ordained, my husband and I were dating at the time. We had lived in a suburb of Chicago. I had people come in from the city for the Seder. And he said to me, you made that Seder so long, because that's what I came from. My father did every word in Hebrew and in English. So gratefully, by the time we had children, I learned you don't do every word of the Seder.
Rabbi, you mentioned Shmur Matzah. Are you going to talk about it at all? Or do you want to explain what it is now?
Yes. So Shmura Matzah is a certain type of matzah where all matzahs for 18 minutes, only 18 minutes. It can't rise. So a lot of the matzah, somebody held it up before. Was it Karen who held up a box of matzah? Oh no, it was Jill. So that matzah is store-made. It's a manufacturer made. Shmura matzah is actually in a factory where each individual piece is, though they've figured out a way to do it mass production too. You put it in for 18 minutes and they watch it the whole time. So if anyone lives like I only know these places, but in Brooklyn, New York, or Lakewood, New Jersey, you can actually go to the matzah factory as a tour and see it made in front of you. Sometimes they actually let you do it as well. So the shmura, lishmor, means to watch. So it's very carefully watched. It often is not a specific, if you buy a box of shmura matzah or get someone to give it to you, your local Chabad rabbi might give you a box of shmura matzah. And they're never the same size. They're always different because it's truly handmade. And really, it doesn't taste so good in my personal opinion, but it's a very cool experience. If anyone lives in the Northeast near New Jersey and you ever want to go into Lakewood and Halavai, one day we can all go out. I know where the factory is. I'll take you there. We can go see it made. Shell.
Hi, good evening. When my kids were little at Korah, the Sunday school took them to the local Chabad where they had a whole setup for Shemar Matzah. And that's and I was just moved, and that's one of the pictures that I have of my niece and my daughter covered with, the little flowers they had, smiling with their Shemar Matzah.
It's a great activity, and to really see that it's very careful, those 18 minutes, to make sure that everything is made perfectly. So there was much to talk about. So hopefully I'm going to get to it. But Ellen, if there are other things like that you suggest, just tell me.
Okay.
So the beginning, what?
I said okay.
Okay. We start with
one thing.
What?
One thing. You mentioned a kittle. You want to tell them what a kittle is?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. A kittle is the white gown that people often associate with the high holidays or Yom Kippur. White is purity. It's almost like a white shroud, and some people wear it at a bris at the circumcision, and on Passover some people wear it as well. I have to say I have never worn a kittle, a white robe at Passover, because I'd be way too scared pouring wine on it by accident. But some people do that. I haven't seen, of course women can, but I haven't seen too many. But it really, it gives a whole atmosphere of the purity at the time. So we begin the Seder with sanctifying the day with a glass of wine, and we recline in a comfortable position because we're supposed to show that we're free people, and free people recline. They're not slaves anymore. So we go into the reclining mode, and you're supposed to, I believe, lean to the right and drink. Some people have special pillows that they've created. I had a Corrigan who made me pillows. She passed away this year. But I usually bring them so that you can lean on and truly show that you are reclining. In my family, we never did this, but some people literally sit on the floor as like Bedouin type things, and they think that's more of a reclining atmosphere. So this is one of the textual studies I wanted to do. There are 4 cups of wine paralleling to the 4 words of action, verbs, associated with the Passover story that comes from the Torah. So I'm looking for a reader. Denise, do you want to read the beginning part, the Jerusalem Talmud?
The Jerusalem Talmud, excuse me, explains that the 4 cups of wine represent the 4 terms or expressions the Torah employs with regard to the Exodus from Egypt. I will take you out, I will save you, I will redeem you, and I will take you to me. All 4 invocations are elements of a single process of redemption. When we drink the cups at the Seder, we are meditatively tapping into the deepest reality of our redemption.
Thank you. So there are 4 stages to the redemption. We could think about how there are 4 stages, and that life is a process, learning is a process. So here is the actual text of where we take it from the Torah, from Exodus 6:6-7. And I have highlighted the actual words in Hebrew, these verbs. So Ruth Shapiro, you want to read it in whichever languages you want?
I'll just keep it English.
Okay.
Say therefore to the Israelite people, I am the Lord. I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians and deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary chastisements. And I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I, the Lord, am your God who freed you from the labors of the Egyptians.
Thank you. So this is a good place to start with thinking about how the Passover Seder and the Haggadah itself, the book we use, traditionally does not mention Moses in it. It doesn't mention Moses because we don't want to give a human being the ability to have saved us and redeemed us, that it's God. So it's about connecting us to God and the power of God. And these are the different verbs. And each verb is then, they say, each verb is then a glass of wine. Again, if you have questions, just stop me. We wash our hands at this point. We don't have a blessing because we're not going to eat anything. We're just dipping the vegetable. So we use greens dipped in salt water, and the greens, as we read, symbolize the spring. The salt water is our tears that we shed during slavery. So I'm just curious if anyone uses anything besides parsley, celery. Some people might use boiled potatoes. Anybody else, just unmute yourself, use anything else during the Seder for the karpas, for your green? Okay. Then we do the Yakats. This is probably the part when your kids actually concentrate, because you take the middle matzah, you break the middle matzah, you take the bigger part, and that's what's saved and hidden for the afikomen, for your dessert. And all the children come and they know that you're supposed to save the afikomen, and you can get a gift or whatever you do in your home. And that's what's hidden, and that's the part of the Yakats. The Magid, we tell the story. So if you have different Haggadot, this is where it probably changes a little bit at this point. We're going to have the 4 questions, and then you tell the story. And this is the part when people might start getting bored. So people tell it differently. There's a traditional part of telling it, and then there's the shortened part. This is the part where you might have some skits. And literally, does Magid sound like another word we've used this evening? Magid, and to tell, this part, and Haggadah, the actual book that we use, come from the same root, to tell. So the whole point isn't to eat at the Seder. That's part of it, of course, but it's really to tell the story and to provoke conversation. So this is one of the prayers that we get to. That's a complete tongue twister, though we sing it, so it might not be as much of a tongue twister because it's actually in Aramaic. Aramaic is the colloquial language that they spoke in ancient times. So it's as if you want somebody, if you're thinking about this, if you really want someone to understand something in the synagogue, you'll say it in English, not necessarily Hebrew, because not everybody understands it. At that time, people weren't familiar with Hebrew as much, so they spoke the colloquial language of Aramaic. Many of our prayers are in Aramaic so that it's understandable to people, such as the Kaddish, the mourner's Kaddish that we say, the mourner's prayer. When we say Kol Nidre, which is the prayers to get rid of all of our vows on Yom Kippur, it's also in Aramaic so that people can understand it. The Ketuvah, the wedding contract that we have, is also traditionally in Aramaic. So this is an open invitation to people. And that might also be another reason why it's in Aramaic, because we're inviting other people in, and our community people around us might not know the Hebrew, but in ancient times, they spoke Aramaic. So, Corinne, will you read the English? This is the Bread of Affliction.
Yes, but before I do, my maiden name was Magid, M-A-G-I-D. And it's always been very interesting. Yeah, so I was a Magid.
That's pretty cool. Was your family storytellers?
Yeah, and I am.
That's true.
I love telling stories. Yeah, written one too. So yeah, and it's quite interesting. Magid. This is the bread of affliction, which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and celebrate Passover. Today we are here. Next year in the land of Israel. Today we are slaves. Next year we will be free. Written in Aramaic, this statement begins the narration of the Seder by inviting the hungry to our table. Aramaic, Jewish legend has it, is the one language which the angels do not understand. Why then is halachma spoken in Aramaic? To teach us what that where there is hunger, no one should rely upon the angels. No one should pray to the heavens for help. We know the language of the poor, for we were poor in the land of Egypt. We know that we are called to feed the poor and to call them to join our celebration of freedom.
Okay, so I would also say that perhaps the angels don't understand it, but we should understand it, and we could be those angels helping others to fulfill the fact that they're still hungry around us. This is the time that we can invite people in. Also, one might not think readily, I'm a slave, but there's something that's enslaving all of us. There's something that we all need to be free and go to. And this is one of 2 times, at least in the Seder, when we actually pray that we'll be in Israel. When we sing L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim next year in Jerusalem, we pray then too. So this really connects us both to our present, that people are hungry now, the past, that we were our ancestors were in Egypt and were slaves, and the future that we're praying for, that will be free, and that next year will be in Israel. So we now get to the, we'll now get to the part of the 4 questions. And I wanted to show those people who happen to be studying with us at Makom B'Yachad, our noon program, that we've been studying Mishnah there, but all these years, you've been studying Mishnah too, some of it exactly, and some of it is a little changed. So this is the origin of where our 4 questions come. It comes from the Mishnah. It's that old, from ancient times around some of the Mishnah was written before the temple was destroyed. Some of it was redacted afterwards, and they were slightly different. You'll see that these questions were connected to the temple period, and they don't relate completely what we have now, but we'll see how it has changed and why it's changed. So Carol, would you read this for us?
Sure. The attendants poured the second cup for the leader of the Seder, and here the child asked the parent the questions about the differences between Passover night and a regular night. And if the child does not have the intelligence to ask questions on one's own, the parent teaches the child the questions. The Mishnah lists the questions. Why is this night different from all other nights? As on all other nights, we eat leavened bread and matzah is preferred. On this night, all our bread is matzah. As on all other nights, we eat other vegetables. On this night, we eat bitter herbs. The Mishnah continues its list of the questions. When the temple was standing, one would ask, as on all other nights, we eat either roasted, stewed, or cooked meat. But on this night, all the meat is the roasted meat of the Paschal Lamb. The final question was asked even after the destruction of the temple. As on all other nights, we dip the vegetables in a liquid during the meal only once. However, on this night, we dip twice. And according to the intelligence and the ability of the child, one's parent teaches the child about the Exodus.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, how many questions are there? Anne writes 1. There's really 1 question asked. And then different answers, but we still call it the 4 questions. Now, which question may have seemed different to you? Was there a question here that you may have never heard before?
Yeah. Isn't it the one about the roasted meat?
The roasted meat. So it shows a development of the Haggadah. So if anyone ever says to you, but we've always done it that way, you can even say, the original 4 questions weren't always the same as what we have today. Originally, they were discussing when the temple was standing, and we were talking about roasted, stewed, cooked foods, and that this night, all the food is roasted meat of the Paschal Lamb. But eventually, there was a development for people to see that, you know what, we don't have the temple anymore, so that question isn't as relevant anymore for us to be asking that. The other thing I want to point out with this is that it's a really developmentally an important educational tool to think about, that they're teaching according to the intelligence and the ability of the child. It's called, I don't know, we have a few educators here, multiple intelligence. So you'll know that nowadays people are visual learners. They learn through audio and different ways. So I was talking to my son's English teacher yesterday, and I was asking her about her technique of listening to the books. And she said, you know, the kids don't always absorb it reading it. They need to listen to it. And then the final project might be a written project, a regular essay. It might be an acting out, it might be a dance, it might be a song, it might be an art project, could be a music, all different ways, because we've learned people learn differently. And they knew that back then in the time of the Mishnah as well, that people learn differently. So we now look at the traditional, what we usually have as the 4 questions. So Jamie, would you read the traditional questions in English? What differentiates?
What differentiates this night from all other nights? On all other nights, we eat chametz and matzah. This night, only matzah. On all other nights, we eat other vegetables. Tonight, only matzah. On all other nights, we don't dip our food, even one time. Tonight, we dip it twice. On all other nights, we either eat sitting or reclining. Tonight, we all recline.
Thank you. So from the very beginning, they use a term, and this isn't a trend. It's chametz. Chametz is the leavened bread. It's bread. So they use a term that not all might know. And let's look at what the other questions were. We don't even have a question in the original about reclining. That came later on. So this is probably a familiar part of the questions. There's a great book, I don't remember how many, 3,000 ways of reading of hearing the 4 questions. It's a wonderful book, comes with a CD of all different languages of how to sing the questions. The author a while ago used to do a lot of book tours. I'm sure he would probably still do it. And it's really great to hear people do it. And what a joy when you hear that youngest child sing it in Hebrew or English or Yiddish. I'm sure we can all have memories of somebody reading it in our home. And if it's not it happens to be we have the youngest child do it, but if you don't, anybody can. Questions before I go on? Because that's, after all, what we do at the Seder. Arlene.
They don't distinguish amongst the sons. When did that all evolve? All of it, because I know the Haggadah says this is the simple son, this is the wicked son, this is the wise.
We're getting to that.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know the exact origin of when they started that. I don't think it's exactly from the Mishnah though, but they realized it was almost implied in this Mishnah that they knew that, no, one right before this, that they knew that not everybody had the same abilities. So I don't like making up answers. I know a lot of people do that. And I'll admit that I don't know everything either. So I hope you don't see it as
seemed like it was written in there that,
right, that hear the intelligence and ability of the child, and then they go off of that to expand on the 4 children, which we are going to get to. So the first answer is Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves in Egypt, and you know what? That could have been an answer, but it probably provoked even more questions after that, because that's not enough of an answer. So now we continue with the whole story. And with the story, we now have the 4 children, which is exactly what Arlene was asking. So I have to say that in my house, when I was even a young child, my sister and I hated the fact that the Maxwell house only had boys, and we would fight over who would do the chacham. So my father would, of course, he would say, one of you do it in Hebrew, one of you do it in English, but I never liked doing the simple child. But let's see in a minute, because it will teach us something.
And which is the chacham?
The wise, sorry, thank you. The wise child. You are correct. So, Sandy, do you want to read the wise child, the chacham? And notice that I put this in gender neutral.
The wise child asked details about the specific meaning of the laws of Passover observance. What are the testimonies, the statutes, and laws which Adonai our God has commanded you? To which we respond with one of the very specific laws of the Passover Seder. The wicked, do you want me to continue or no?
Yeah, you can. That's good.
The wicked child asks, whatever does this mean to you? The authors admonish this child as one who is not concerned about the laws personally, but only for others. This exchange reminds us of the importance of not separating ourselves from our community or from traditions that might seem uncomfortable or foreign to us, but rather to engage with them in ways that enable us to connect with our community. The simple child asks, what does this mean? To which a straightforward summary of the story is given directly from the Torah. It was with a mighty hand that God brought us out of Egypt, the house of bondage. In response to the child who does not know how to ask, we are instructed to open it up and explain. It is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt.
So they have depicted here the 4 different types of children. The Chacham, the wise child, who really wants to know the details. They're like, what are these? Why are we doing this? What are these statutes, these testimonies, these laws? What exactly is it? And you respond to him or her directly with the specific laws. The wicked child, the Hebrew is Rasha, which was a term that was in a lot of what Rabbi Sella was teaching yesterday at Makom B'Yachad. Some of you were on it with Proverbs, that the wicked child is asking, what does this mean to me? This isn't important to me. What do I have to be here for? This person wants to separate themselves from the whole community. And the simple child, honestly, the simple child is one of my favorite. They just want to know, what does this mean? Straightforward, just tell me the straight on. Tell me the answer. And the child who doesn't know really what to ask, they don't know the words, they don't know how to express it. She'eino yodea lish'ol, that's the Hebrew, one who doesn't know how to ask. And the simple child, the Hebrew word is tam. You open it up. You like magnify it and explain it and say, God did this for me, brought me out of Egypt, and bring them too. So there's the idea, in a way, that yes, for 2 things. Each of these people are going to be at your Seder table. So now you might say, but what if I only have 2 people at my Seder table? Or what if I'm sitting there by myself? Each of us is one of these people in all of our times in our life. Or at the very same moment, we could be that same person. There might be one thing that we want to know the specific parts of it and to explain it all. And sometimes you just want to get it straight out. You just want to know right away the importance of it. But really, it shows that we shouldn't differentiate people because we never know what the other person is. And we truly are all of these children. So any thoughts about this part? Marion.
I think there's a Haggadah now that talks about the children in a different way, that the child isn't wicked. I think they're trying to explain that maybe they have to be advised or told what's doing, that they're not necessarily wicked. And the simple child now may be somebody who is, has problems understanding. So I think they're being more sensitive to the wording in the new Haggadahs now, to how you explain these children.
Exactly. So there are Haggadahs that will explain it that way. They'll explain something by social justice, by racial ideas, by LGBTQ, all different ways to really show it. And the person is not necessarily, in some places, it's bad to ask a question. So they're considered wicked. But it's just a curiosity. And what's a better time than at the Seder table when you're supposed to ask questions, to be curious? Dana?
When I was at the Torah Fund board, Rabbi Golunkin gave a little presentation, a drash on the 4 children, and made an analogy to it being developmental stages where the simple child is a child who's too young to really say anything. And then you work up to the next level where they ask a simple question to the rebellious teenager, and then to become wise as we grow older.
Right.
That's really good. That's good.
And they might even be wise younger, and then they become rebellious afterwards and then question everything. And it might change at each point. That was a wonderful discussion that Rabbi Galinkin did at the Torah Fund cabinet meeting. So it's all of us at one point in our lives, or at the same moment as well. So I cannot believe that we're so much time in this class. So I'm going to move ahead a little bit. So we then have the 10 plagues. I wasn't going to go on this too much. The typical question I used to ask were, what are the 10 plagues that are in life today? But I don't think we have to look too far to know the answer to that one. So we were just finishing in the Torah portion this: blood, frogs, vermin, flies, cattle disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, death of the firstborn. And there are several places in the Haggadah where we're talking about what our enemies had to endure. And it doesn't really sound so nice what we do. What do we do to symbolize that we're a little uncomfortable with the fact that our enemies were dying because of the 10 plagues? There are different customs now. People, for each of the plagues, people sometimes use their pinky, sometimes they use their spoon. And for each word, each of the plagues, we dip out a little bit, as if we're dipping out some of the blood that was dropped because of the pain that the Egyptians had. Definitely not a set, you have to do this type of thing. This is a custom that people do differently, because after this, imagine that you're sticking your finger in, or your spoon. Some people lick it off, and some people say don't lick it off. Make sure it drips down, because we shouldn't be eating that blood. There's a lot of Baba Mitzvahs, wives' tales and stories that we do. So then the song Dayenu we get to. Great song. And in some families, they take scallions and they hit each other. Haven't done that in my house. I learned that when my sons were young. Didn't want to continue doing that. Okay. Moving along, I wanted to show you how we get to, and the parts in the Magid that I cut out that not going through all of this, the story part, a lot of it is directly from the Mishnah, where we're studying. And they go through the different words of, like, if this, and it was this amount of things, and this, it was this amount of things. That's typical Mishnah study. But here's a Mishnah study of the 3 types of the true symbols that you have to see at the Seder. Now, probably we'll look at the text from the actual Mishnah here that we take. So I'm looking for someone who I haven't had read yet. Debbie. And if you don't want to read, I let everyone pass. It's not school. I don't know if there's more than one Debbie. Okay. Debbie will read for us. Thank you.
Debbie will try to read for you.
Okay.
Rabbi Gamliel would say, anyone who did not see these 3 matters on Passover has not fulfilled one's obligation: the Paschal Lamb, Matzah, and bitter herbs. When one mentions these matters, one must elaborate and explain them. The Paschal Lamb is brought because the omnipresent passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt, as it is stated, that you shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Paschal offering for God passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when God smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses.
Thank you. So the first symbol is a Paschal Lamb. And honestly, the wording is almost exactly the same, what we have in our Haggadah. So when you read this in the Haggadah, you're studying Mishnah. The next symbol, the Matzah. I'll get somebody. Nancy, I didn't call on you yet, right?
No.
Okay.
I think I'm the only Nancy. Rabbi Gamliel continues to explain, the reason for the matzah is because our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt, as it is stated, and they baked the dough that they took out of Egypt as cakes of matzah, for it was not leavened. As they were thrust out of Egypt, they could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any rituals from Exodus 12:39.
Okay. So the first one was Pesach. That's symbolic of the Paschal Lamb, the sacrifice we had. Of course, it's the zroa. It's the shank bone that we have on the Seder table. The matzah that we eat. And they couldn't tarry. It couldn't rise. And then the third symbol is the maror. Sandy Carlton.
The reason for bitter herbs is because the Egyptians embittered our ancestors' lives in Egypt, as it is stated. And they embittered their lives with hard service, in mortar and in brick, in all manner of service in the field. All the service that they made them serve was with rigor.
Thank you. So this is sort of like later-ish in the Seder, and we probably have heard about these symbols already earlier on, because most people set their Seder table and do the plate like I did earlier. But these are the three true symbols on the Seder plate, on the at your table. And when you do this, you're supposed to actually lift up each of these items at your Seder table. Okay, we'll go on with the next part of this Mishnah. Madeline, is that how you pronounce your name? Madeline? Oh, you have to just unmute though.
Okay.
Very good. Okay.
Okay. The Tana of the Mishnah further states, in each and every generation, a person must view oneself as though one personally left Egypt, as it is stated, and you shall tell your child on that day, saying, it is because of this which the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt.
Okay, so this was all from the Mishnah. I'm not quoting the Haggadah at this time, what we just read. And, okay, we don't have to read that part. And not only that, Rabban Gamliel says that if you didn't do this, didn't talk about these three things, you haven't fulfilled your obligation. Now, this is the text from the Haggadah. And it is actually almost the exact same wording as is in the Mishnah. So it's really great to see that we're not just reading the Haggadah, the prayer, the booklet, but we're studying. We're doing sacred text study. So when you think about it, this year may have been the first time, or 18 months plus a year and a half. So 3 years ago, you may have started studying Mishnah with Women's League, but you've always been studying it. And at this point, it's one of my most important parts, in my opinion, at the Seder table, to really personalize it, that in every generation, we should be obligated to see ourselves if we left Egypt as well. And don't think about it that you've been slaving over the stove and cleaning your house for the past week beforehand, but literally there's something that's enslaving us. And nowadays, it's not that hard to see it. You can either say that what's enslaving us is that there's such diversity in the world that's wonderful, but then there's also the intolerance that takes place as well, that people don't listen to each other. That in every generation, there's something that's plaguing us. That's something that that is holding us back. So I mentioned different Haggadahs. One of these days, I'll get one of these, maybe this year for my birthday, that there's an artist in Israel, maybe one of you has it, David Moss, who was a scholar and resident at Camp Ramon, Wisconsin, when I was a camper there, not a camper, a staffer in the 90s. And he created a Haggadah where at this part in the Seder, he has this piece of paper, which any of you are, if you're an artist, you probably know the exact word, but it's reflective paper. It's as if there's a mirror. So that when you open this part of it, the Seder, and you look in the Haggadah, you can literally see yourself in the Haggadah, because behold or vador, in every generation we should see ourselves, and he's created an image in his Haggadah so that you can see yourself. So there was one year, I think it was at my women's Seder, where I handed out little mirrors that people could bring to their Seder, so they can literally look at themselves at the Seder and see themselves as if they left Egypt as well. Just curious, does anybody familiar with the Moss Haggadah? Does anybody own it? I bet you're familiar, many of you,
how do
with.
You spell? I'm sorry, how do you spell
M-O-S-S.
Thank you.
Some of you are probably familiar with David Moss, though. If you've been to the Women's League Seminary Synagogue, our synagogue at JTS, that there is a stender, a podium that was created that he made. And in each part of the stender, you can take out an item that you need for a holiday. So there's a part that has a place to put your etrog, a place to put your Megillah, a place to put your Kiddush stuff, your Havdalah stuff, so stuff for Shabbat, stuff to end Shabbat. He created that as well. Next time, God willing, we're all at JTS and we'll at the Women's League Seminary Synagogue, we can see that. Our people, I'm sure Carol's familiar with it, yes? My daughter was in Spot last week and she started telling me about this amazing stender that they had and it has all these things in it. I said, yeah, Cameron, I'll tell you exactly where to meet the artist. Go in, tell him I say hello, because I know the artist who did it. So this Haggadah also, you could see yourself. So if you want to add something to your Seder table next year, bring a mirror so everyone can see themselves. We wash our hands. Let me see time. Oh, okay. This hour and a half goes by quickly. So Rachsa, we wash our hands and we say a prayer. And you're not supposed to talk between it because you're not supposed to have a break between washing and saying the prayer and actually doing the object of why you're washing, which is motzi matzah, of eating the matzah. But you do say a prayer and you eat the matzah. We eat the maror. They show the horseradish here. Some people might actually have raw horseradish. If I'm at a Seder where people aren't familiar with this, I usually warn them beforehand not to eat it too quickly. The Korah is the first original sandwich. Hillel made a sandwich, of course, with 2 pieces of matzah, and in between you put the charoset and a little bit of maror, and you say the prayer, and this is probably people's favorite part of the Seder, because then afterwards we have Shulchan Aruch, and it's when you eat the meal, a set table. You eat the meal. Tafun is to look, as you're seeing, and you're looking for the afikomen, that broken part of the matzah. And that is supposed to be your afikomen, literally means dessert, and that should be the last thing you eat. Barech is when you say Birkat HaMazon, the blessing after the meals, which I know that you guys have studied that in your previous Birkat Bat Mitzvah classes. I have to tell you that when I was little and I didn't know exactly what we were saying, and my grandfather would rattle this part off, I thought he was of course he was the coolest thing, but I thought he was the coolest thing because he said it so quickly, this part. And then I was like, oh, it's Birkat HaMazon. He knows it by heart, the grace after meals. That's why he said it so quickly. I thought he was just getting tired like the rest of us. Okay, so this is one part that I really wanted to talk about. We now get to the part where after we say Birkat HaMazon, you then open the door for Elijah and let Elijah, the prophet, in to drink from Elijah's cup. You're supposed to put some wine in. So I could tell you, I don't know how many of you grew up in apartment buildings. I grew up in an apartment building, and I would always be the nudnik in my house to say to my parents, it's great that we have an apartment door open, but how do I know that the front door is open for Elijah? Might not be. That was when I believed he was coming. And that was when I didn't understand what these words were, which are very painful, to tell you the truth. So these are the words that are traditionally recited as we open the door for Elijah to come into our Seder. Judith Carlin, you want to read for us? And you're unmuted already. That's why I called on you.
Right, okay. Pour your wrath upon the nations that did not know you and upon the kingdoms that did not call upon your name. Since they have consumed Yaakov and laid waste his habitation, Psalm 79, 6, 7, pour out your fury upon them and the fierceness of your anger shall reach them. Psalm 69, 25. You shall pursue them with anger and eradicate them from under the skies of the Lord. Lamentations 3:66.
Okay, so this is the liturgical part of when we open the door to allow Elijah in to join us in our Seder. Elijah is supposed to be bringing us to the salvation, to redemption, time of the Messiah. And we're saying, in my personal opinion, these horrible words, while your door is open to everybody, that you should pour out your wrath to all the other nations who don't know God. In my opinion, and I like to say in my opinion, because it's just my opinion, you can have other opinions, other rabbis have other opinions. It really shows at that time that they didn't have this idea of tolerance for other people. They didn't realize that we need to live with others, and also was a different time that it was difficult to live with others, that they wanted everyone to believe in God and believe in the same way. And it could be why we now have another ritual that we've created at this point to outweigh the harshness of the Shvoch Hamotcha, to take out the wrath of others. Personally, I find it very painful. I have to say, I didn't always understand how difficult the words are. But this is the part that we now have the Kos Miriam. And I'm going to go back in a minute to see if anybody has any comments about what we did before. So Eileen, I want to hear you talk about Miriam again. Will you read Miriam's cup? Eileen gave a great Devar Torah at our executive committee meeting today, a little bit about Miriam and Devorah and Yael. I think you're trying to unmute yourself. Okay, great.
I had 3 other names in there as well that you're not saying, but that's another story.
Oh, keep going. Who are the other 3?
Anat, Yochi, and Cameron.
Thank you.
This is the cup of Miriam, the cup of living waters. Let us remember the exodus from Egypt. These are the living waters, God's gift to Miriam, which gave new life to Israel as we struggled with ourselves in the wilderness. Blessed are you, God, who brings us from the narrows into the wilderness, sustains us with endless possibilities, and enables us to reach a new place.
Okay, so people have different ways that they do this. Some people at the beginning of the Seder will pass around the Miriam's cup, a whole separate cup, and each person at their own seat adds their own water to it. And then at the end, some might say this, and because it's a new ritual, there's not really a set place to put it in the Seder, in my opinion, but I've often wanted to put it here to offset the blood of Elijah, that you might say that that's the wrath and the blood and the wine, and the water. I mean, we all come from water. The child is in an amniotic fluid of the water. That water is life. That Miriam, who we celebrate this week for Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of song, and the Torah portion of Bishalach, that after the children of Israel walked through the Red Sea, Moses sang a song, and Miriam led the people and the women in song and dance as well. So another thing you can add to your Seder are tambourines and timbrels.
It's the song.
Yes, and of course Miriam's song as well. Right. So how many people, I'm curious, have both a Miriam's cup and Elijah's cup at their Seder table? Pretty awesome. I like that. And if you don't yet, you could. And it's something to add to the Seder to really show that you have to think about both the past of our wrath of the Elijah's cup and the future of water as well. So I'm going to move on because I want to get to Shavuot somehow. After we open, okay, so we open the door, you fill Miriam's cup, you do Hallel, you sing the Psalms, and it's a good start for your prayer in the morning, because if you don't get to the morning service, the same songs are said there too. Nirtzah, we say the end part of this next year in Jerusalem, and we hope that we'll be there, and we sing the different songs. Some people sing Echad Mi Yodea, who knows one, which is a great lesson of knowing from 1 to 13, the different stages. I haven't gone through all of that. The Chad Gadya talks a little bit about how we're being oppressed all the time. Adir Hu, where we praise God. Then there are 2 songs that one of these days I'm going to do intense research on that is very long. You do one on the first night, one on the second night. God willing, this year I'm going to be in Israel for Pesach. That's where my mother's bringing us this year, because she figures half of her grandchildren, 3 of her granddaughters So 3 out of the 6 grandchildren are in Israel. Hopefully we'll make it there. Who knows? I don't think it's going to be in our hands. And I'm kind of bummed because we're only going to have 1 Seder, which I don't agree with, but even though I'm the rabbi, I'm not making the decision for my family. Because in Israel, they celebrate 1 day. As if those who were on Makom B'Yachad remember that the Mishnah, the teaching in Rosh Hashanah teaches us that they used to have the calendar by having these fires on the mountains, and each day people would find out when the new moon was. So there might have been a delay. So outside of Israel, they delay the holiday and make it 2 days instead of 1. And at the second Seder, or even on the second day of Passover, you start counting to Shavuot, 7 weeks until the next holiday. So as part of the Jewish people, we set our lives by the Jewish calendar, and we're always looking forward to something else. So somebody said here before, it's not even Purim yet. Why are we talking about Passover? It's like when Hanukkah's over, do you then, at least I in my head, think about Tu B'Shvat on Monday, the 15th of Shvat, the New Year of Trees. Once the New Year of Trees is over, then you think about Purim. We're always planning for the next step and the next Jewish holiday in our calendar. So in my next 14 minutes, does anyone have any questions about this before I go on to Shavuot? Lori. Oh, sorry. I think you're muted again because I was about to say.
You did. Yes, you muted me. Just very briefly, I wanted to say a memorable moment my family had was my father went to open the door for Elijah and the FedEx man was standing there. So we didn't know. They both almost died of shock. But anyway, it was definitely a big gasp from everybody around the table.
That's pretty funny, actually.
It was
what
pretty
the FedEx guy thought.
I don't know.
Anybody else? Oh, that's very cool. Faye Levinson wrote that every past president of the Philadelphia branch received a Miriam's cup as her outgoing gift. I like that.
I just want to know, where are all the drawings from, all those illustrations? They were really lovely.
Thank you. So we have a staff member, Isabel, who put them together for me, and I actually let her do it. I believe she found it from Haggadot.com. And I didn't even tell her exactly to do it. She just added all the symbols, and I was just like, you could tell she was a religion major. She was really pretty awesome. No. So Geraldine, you didn't get these pages yet. You will get them though. Don't worry. We'll get it to you, the slideshow. And there are a lot of places online where you can make your own Haggadah. So Haggadot, I think it's with 2 G's, .com is one. If you Google Barry Dove Lerner, he's a conservative rabbi who, he has his own matzah making factory. He goes around and teaches people how to make matzah. And he also has something online where it's like almost 200 pages worth of a Haggadah. You can imagine why so much, because there are a lot of parody songs that have been made for the Seder. I debated showing you all these different parody songs, but that wouldn't be educational. That wouldn't be my rabbinic way. So there are lots of different ways to bring it in. Ask some child, you'll learn some great songs. These are the people around the Seder table. Debbie Friedman, of course, has a bunch of songs as well. Any other comments before we get to Shavuot?
Where would I get the Harry Potter Haggadah?
Amazon. I don't know where you get it in Canada, but I get everything on Amazon. That is where I ordered mine.
My grandchild, and I would love to give him that for a present.
Yes, it's very cool. I think that one I got 2 years ago.
What's it called? Harry Potter's Haggadah?
Yes. If you Google Haggadah in Amazon, you'll be looking for a while.
It's called the unofficial Hogwarts Haggadah, actually, on Amazon.
Okay. Lori, you got the name.
The Maccabees also have some really great, they're an a cappella group. They have some really great ones every year for Passover, for every
Maccabees 613.
Yeah.
Is also pretty fantastic. And there's another group too. I like the mixed group ones, but there's another one from Yeshiva University too that have parody songs. Arlene.
I'd like to share that our sisterhood this year, we tied Tu B'Shvat to Passover, and we sent out personalized packets of parsley with a letter about, Tu B'Shvat. And if you plant the parsley on Tu B'Shvat, that you can then use it to be on your Seder plate. So we did that. We sent it to our sister members this week, and hopefully they will plant. And we also sent it to the religious school to make a connection from sisterhood to the religious school families. And
I love that idea.
Gave each of them.
I love that idea.
And it was really neat. It was neat, this site that, sells seeds. They offered it to be personalized. So it says, Tu B'Shvat 2022, and on the back, compliments of Sisterhood of TBE. So that was really, we thought it was an inexpensive way to make that connection with our sisterhood members as well as our religious school families.
And I have to say quickly, Barbara Finkel would be very upset with me if I didn't put in a plug for the Seaboard Region Education Day, which is going to be March 20th. And it's programs about Pesach. There's going to be a woman who has created this program. Her mother-in-law died in the Tree of Life shooting, and she created this program called Two for Seder, about inviting people to your Seder. And she'll be talking about that. And then there's an author who's written an environmental Haggadah, and she's going to be talking about that. And we'll put the link and all that information in Women's League Week, but I just wanted to put in a plug for that.
The founder of Two for Seder is a very dear friend of mine. I'm in sisterhood with Barbara Finkel. It's a wonderful organization. Number 2 for FOR Seder.
And of course, women's Seders are fantastic because traditionally we're stuck in the kitchen so often, but the whole reason that we have Passover is because of the women. Just go back to the story in the Midrash. It's not in the Torah. It's not in the actual Torah. It's a added literature, rabbinic literature, that says that when Moses was going to be born, so go back a second, when Pharaoh told the Jewish people that you had to throw all your sons into the water and kill them once they were born, Miriam, his sister, went to his parents and said, "You can't possibly do that. How can you do that? We need to save our children because that's the future." And she told her parents, "Let's hide him, and then we will make sure that he's raised properly." And of course, he was raised by Pharaoh's daughter in Pharaoh's palace. And women saved Judaism and saved as the part of the Passover Seder. So we have women's Seders, not just with the Miriam's cup, but each part of it, we have it. I don't know the exact date, but Women's League is planning an international event that our educator, Rabbi Margie Sell, is doing, all about different Passover ideas. So check your Women's League week about that as well. And Shell, I saw that you had your hand up.
I just wanted to share sort of a rite of passage. When my daughter Natanya turned 21, she attended the Women's Seder with me at Sherry Tefillah, which is sort of like our little, every yearly thing. And it was just marvelous.
Women's Seders are the best. How many people were ever, thank you for sharing that. Was anybody ever able to go to Debbie Friedman's Seder, the Women's Seder that she used to run in Manhattan? Well, unfortunately, we can't all do that anymore, but I was privileged to be able to do that when I was in rabbinical school. And it was just amazing to see the woman herself there teaching and leading the Women's Seder, which was like 300-400 people in downtown Manhattan. I remember looking out, and it was definitely pre 9/11. I think we were able to see the Twin Towers from where we were sitting at the Seder, and it was just magnificent.
Women's League's Pesach event is going to be March 24th. It's exactly a week after Purim.
And it's a little different take on Passover. It is not a women's Seder. It's coming in at it in a different way. Rabbi, we'll reschedule Shavuot. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, that's not a problem. It's all set up, but
okay, because the time element, and we'll figure all that out. Julia and I will put our heads together. Okay.
Did people have other questions? There was so much that you could touch on for Passover. I know you had the materials that Julia sent you. I wanted to add a little bit something else to show you that there's text behind what we're learning and what we're reading at the Seder. It was, Jill had her hand up.
This is actually, I mean, it might be too much of a question to ask you now, and it might not even have an answer to. But last week I prepared Bo for Machon B'Yachad, which of course I couldn't talk. And one of the things I was looking at, I was actually raising questions. And one of the things I could not find an answer for, I know the story we told about eating matzah is because they were in a rush to get out. But if you go and you read through chapter 12 of Bo, they really weren't in a rush. They knew ahead of time. You know, God told them to start counting the months in Nisan by the first day. And on the 10th day, they were supposed to get a Paschal Lamb, and there's all these criteria, you know, that the lamb had to be whatever, perfect. And that they had to slaughter it and they had to prepare this meal, and they ate matzah in the Seder that they had in
that first Seder, correct.
And there wasn't a rush to get out. I mean, how long does it take for bread to rise? So if you look at that, I mean, the story of leaving in a hurry, I mean, I guess if you talk about 14 days, it is a hurry. But I mean, they really did have time for the bread. They were told to eat matzah at this Seder that they prepared before they even left Egypt. So, I mean, why matzah? There's got to be more to it. I mean, it's like, that's a big question. And when I looked through Sefaria and stuff, when I was doing my research, I couldn't really find anything. And I really wasn't getting an answer. It might not be something you can answer right now, but it's something that really bothered me when I was studying.
It's a good question. It goes along with the whole 4 children part. So traditionally we say that it's because we had to rush, but I wonder if it also, if you think about it, it's a lot quicker to make matzah than sourdough bread. So perhaps, just as an example, and that I haven't made, but I have made challah, and that takes a really long process, but matzah's quick. So perhaps we're showing the quickness of not just rushing, but maybe that's not the most important essence of life, that we need the simple things in life. And they were in a rush in a way because they were living in Egypt for hundreds of years. And now they were suddenly leaving. So just thinking about picking up your house that and a lot of you have done this.
I mean, but
already.
they were preparing. I guess 14 days is not a lot of time.
Right.
You're living there for hundreds of years, but it's not like, okay, you're leaving now.
And I totally agree with you that why we had to have that.
I mean, that was something that really bothered me. Actually, I had a bunch of questions like that about that whole chapter 12 being thrown in the middle of everything. But I mean, but the matzah part really, I don't know. Like I couldn't find an answer when I was going through whatever source materials I did have when I looked through it. So I'm just.
And also, if you read further in a couple of weeks when we're building the tabernacle, the movable temple they had all these elaborate items that they needed to make for the tabernacle, dolphin skins. And then if you think about all the gold that they use, and the women, they say that the women didn't give up their jewelry to make the golden calf. So they all had time to carry those things out. So you might wonder, why did we have to have this simplistic matzah that didn't have time to rise because we were rushing? Clearly they had time to take some other things. So there's definitely, it makes a good story, and then it makes for good questions.
Somebody has to make a midrash about. I mean, I've been
exactly.
I was on Naomi's class, and actually I just got a couple of books that she recommended use. And I'm just saying, maybe somebody needs to come up with a midrash about something more to the matzah than just they're in a rush.
So midrash is rabbinic literature that fills in the empty spaces of not knowing what took place. So there's a lot more that took place in that story of, what was it like to live in a community when everyone around you was dying? What was it like to pick up your life after living there for hundreds of years and rushing out? So Sharon, and then I think we need to wrap up.
Yes, from what I understood, the you know, they having to go and ask for gifts from the Egyptians before leaving. A lot of those materials were used in the making of the tabernacle, like it was all part of God's plan. But some of it was just so, like, they couldn't have been asking the Egyptians for things like the beams of wood. And I know there was a story about how Moses or other people had brought potted plants with them for the wood, and that was one part I couldn't understand either. You know, some of the stuff that's used to build the tabernacle I could see coming from the gifts, but some of the stuff like the beams of wood, where is this coming from?
Right. So there, and then it goes along with the whole idea that you could be a skeptic and say, how did this happen? Or you can say, this is the story the Torah is telling us, so we'll go along with it and try to understand it the best we could. Similar to the fact that, you know, there are many parts, in my opinion, at the Seder that are troublesome, thinking about how our enemies had all these plagues, the Shvo Chamotcha, but then the wrath of pour out the wrath of our enemies during the Elijah's cup. But then there's all this beauty of knowing that everyone is welcome to be at your Seder table. Halach ma'anya, everyone should be there with you. And that in every generation we go through this. And that there are all those 4 children that are there with us, and each of us are there. And why are there questions? Because they're not always answers to things. It's a symbolism for life, that there's so many questions in life that we don't have the answers to.
Thank
Ellen,
you,
you're still
Rabbi.
muted.
Thank you so much. That was really, yeah, there's so much information for Pesach, and we'll get back to Shavuot, maybe closer to the holiday. So it makes more sense. Just a quick note about next month. Next month, we're talking about Rosh Chodesh, and it's February 3rd, so not even a full month away, and it's just after Rosh Chodesh Adar. So I had asked Eileen, I sent you a message. When is the Women of the Wall? It's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, so I wasn't sure which day.
I believe I saw on the website that it's February 3rd, so it would be the day before, which would be February 2nd at midnight, because that's they're 7 hours ahead. Because when I was doing the Dvar Torah today, I had that as the last sentence, but I didn't.
Okay, so check that out. Check out the Women of the Wall website. It's at midnight East Coast time, 7 a.m. And it's really amazing to watch and be supportive. And then we'll be learning about Rosh Chodesh. There's no assigned reading for the next class. So I will just send out handouts as usual before the week before the class, or that week of the class.
Julia, what is the date again?
When you send that out, you can also include the date for Rosh Chodesh and let them know.
Okay.
They can just go on Facebook on the website.
The class is February 3rd, Thursday, February 3rd. And according to my handy dandy Women's League calendar diary, Rosh Chodesh is Tuesday and Wednesday that day. So I'm not sure which.
The Women of the Wall is going to be on Wednesday, February 2nd. I just looked on their website.
At 7 a.m. So it would be Tuesday night then. Tuesday night at
midnight.
So Wednesday midnight. Yes.
Wednesday morning.
Yeah. And Eileen, Carol brought it up, but the Women of the Wall program that we're having on January 30th with Yochi Rappaport, the executive director, is that her position, at Women of the Wall, will be fantastic.
She's unbelievable. She's a dynamo. She really is.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to skip our Debbie Friedman song because we're running a little bit late. I could put up the slide if we want to read the words, or I could play it. Maybe I'll just play it, but if you want to, I'll play you out. How's that?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this honor.
Always wonderful, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. So much to think about this year.
Wonderful
Thank
class.
you so much.
And Ellen and Julia, thank you. Great.
Yes, thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I look
See you
forward to
tomorrow,
my
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Rabbi,
Bye.
Rabbi,
you.
stay on for a minute.
I will. You're going to play the
Have a
song
good
so we
night.
have it on the radio?
I am. It's coming.
Yeah, because it's her yard site anyway.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oops, didn't play it from the beginning. Sorry. Let's try it again.
That's finished.
What? Did it stop?
I've got to stop.
For our teachers and their students and the students of the students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. And for those who study Torah here and everywhere, may they be blessed with all they need, and let us say we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.